There we go. Recording is in progress. So now I guess what you say
Nice.
is at least Patreon solid.
Yeah,
But
excellent.
yeah, I think this is the first one of these I've done in a couple weeks. Actually, I haven't Twilight Zoned in the past couple weeks for whatever reason.
Oh,
I guess I
okay.
got
Yeah.
ahead for a while, but now I'm starting to fall behind. This
Yeah.
one's
You
right where it needs to be. So
yeah. You only have a few left.
yeah. Let's see what's on the
Yeah.
list.
Wow.
After this, there's just one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, 10 after this. Yeah, so we're
Wow.
getting there. Up
What a
one.
journey.
Two more directed by Beneath the Planet of the Apes director Ted Post. One, two,
Ooh.
three, four more by Richard Donner. Okay.
Oh, wow.
But the last one that had Donner was From Agnes with Love, which is
Hmm.
not a standout episode. So,
Yeah.
director doesn't necessarily equal notable episode.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is 60s TV. There's not much room for the auteur voice.
Right. Although you could argue this episode might be going for a bit of that, so we'll,
Oh,
we'll
yeah,
get
yeah,
into
yeah.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
Agnes, no. This one for sure. So, I guess we'll start talking about it then. Give it
Sure.
just a quick pause, and I will start the show. Hello, welcome to Time Enough Podcast, where we delve into all of the episodes of the Twilight Zone and beyond. This is Matt here, coming back. It's John Arminio. How's it hanging?
Oh, it's going okay. I'm glad to be back talking Rod Serling with you, my friend.
Yep. A straight dose of Serling this week. This is
Hmm.
I Am the Night, Color Me Black, and this is a request from you. Some episodes get assigned, some get requested. You
Yeah.
requested this one. You want to uh, get into that?
Um, this episode title just sticks out at me because it is the title of a great heavy metal song by the band Priestess off of their album Hello Master. The song doesn't have anything to do with the episode, at least lyrically, but it's also just a really great episode. So it's worth talking about.
Okay, if it's a little serendipity that gets you on it, that's perfectly
Yeah,
fine. So,
yeah.
for me, it is a first time view of this one. I hadn't
Hmm.
seen this one before. I feel like this is a very good episode. I don't feel like is particularly well known.
Yeah,
Maybe it
yeah.
was one of the ones they didn't. I'm not sure. I can't confirm if this was one of the ones that didn't make it a syndication. I don't think so. I think it was part of syndication. So,
Yeah, I think it was a first viewing for me as well.
but yeah, I will do a little bit of trivia for this, and then we'll crack it open, I guess. So,
Hmm.
the original air date was March 27th, 1964. As previously mentioned, the script is a Serling. Abner Bieberman directed. He's been here before for number 12 Looks Just Like You. His 60s gig was directing stuff like Gilligan's Island and Hawaii Five-O. And before that, he was a character actor for studio genre films in the 40s and 50s, either as the quote unquote ethnic person or as like the heavy. Sheriff Koch was
Sometimes those are one and the same.
well in the 40s and yeah, and
Yeah,
then but in the 40s and 50s, it's just like he looks vaguely, it's like the Eastern European guy that can play
yeah,
any ethnicity, which now sounds like questionable.
sure.
Sheriff Koch was played by Michael Constantine. His work on screen was pretty sporadic, but he'd make an impact many years later as Costas Gus Portokalos in My Big Fat Greek Wedding. I've actually never seen that movie. Have you seen that one?
It's fine.
Okay. Well, the most fascinating thing is just the if you look at the box office of that movie, it's just
Yeah,
insane. It just stays there for 6 months and slowly becomes like a massive blockbuster, which
yeah, that's a sociological phenomenon worthy of study.
yeah.
More than the film.
And then the second one came out and fell flat on its face. It was like time and place, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting, interesting.
Paul Fix played Mr. Colby. His main trade was in westerns, notably as Marshal Micah Torrance on the TV series The Rifleman. Ivan Dixon was Reverend Anderson. He had a regular role on Hogan's Heroes and would later move into directing TV. He also got a bit into directing movies, notably Trouble Man. I mean, that stuck out to me because it features a soundtrack by Marvin Gaye just before What's Going On, I believe. It's here just
Yeah,
before or just after, yeah.
And yeah, that movie is a lot of fun, but like for me, he's an absolute hero for directing The Spook Who Sat by the Door, which is a true cult movie. That's about a black CIA operative who utilizes his training in the CIA to then quit the CIA and conduct a guerrilla war against America as a means of black liberation.
Right.
So that movie was suppressed by the FBI.
No way.
Yeah,
Not the
so that's yeah,
CIA.
yeah. So that's why. Well, because the CIA can't do anything
Yeah.
legally, can't do anything domestically. So the FBI was the one to suppress it. But yeah, it's sometimes available in Internet Archive, sometimes available on YouTube. I think there's a release somewhere. But yeah, absolutely worth watching. It's very provocative, but also a total blast.
All right. A couple more folks on my list here. Deputy Pierce was played by George Lindsay. He is best known as Goober Pile from the Andy Griffith verse, as in like multiple shows, and was also a featured player on Hee Haw. As an editorial note, I do believe that watching Hee Haw in 2025 may actually drive you insane. You ever see that show? I'm from the deep south, so Hee Haw was just on the TV.
No, not even when I was at the age where I would w be watching like syndicated shows of that era. It was never in my purview.
No, no, in the South, you'd go to someone's house and it would be on, hillbilly
Yeah.
nonsense madness.
I
But
watched Beverly Hillbillies, but not Hee Haw.
yeah, yeah, different vibe. I mean, Green Acres is probably it's weird how the 60s and the 70s had so much weird hillbilly madness going
Yeah.
on. So, but I have had the pleasure, in Japan, some of the other foreign teachers are from countries. So
Hmm.
sometimes I describe that show to them and they think I'm making a joke. I'm like, I have to go to YouTube and just show them, man, no, this is real, man.
Yeah.
Terry Becker played Rolling Stone singer Mick Jagger. Wait, no, that's not right. No, no, Terry Becker played Jagger. He was more of a director, it seems. Did MASH, Mission Impossible, Brady Bunch, Mod Squad, and some other stuff. I just wrote down, the names that stuck out to me.
Yeah.
Um, the music here is actually Bernard Herrmann. They took needle drops from the very first episode of the Twilight Zone, Where Is Everybody, and used them in here. So okay. I don't do I can put it in the chat if you need, but if you have a prologue anywhere in eyesight, could you give us that?
Yeah. Sheriff Charlie Koch on the morning of an execution. As a matter of fact, it's 7:30 in the morning. Logic and natural laws dictate that at this hour there should be daylight. It is a simple rule of physical science that the sun should rise at a certain moment and supersede the darkness. But at this given moment, Sheriff Charlie Koch, a deputy named Pierce, a condemned man named Jagger, and a small, inconsequential village will shortly find out that there are causes and effects that have no precedent, such is usually the case in the Twilight Zone.
All right. As we've already acknowledged, this is a good episode, but I did have a couple weird sticking points for the episode. I
Sure.
guess I'll just throw out right at top. One, 1964. I don't think a small town has the jurisdiction to just execute somebody.
No, it's interesting that they chose to like the sets are so bare, as is typical for a lot of Twilight Zone episodes, that it could have easily been like an old West town. So I'm not sure
That would have made more
why
sense. Yeah.
they didn't make it that, but yeah, they're yeah, a sheriff is just executing a guy like the day
That's
after his conviction,
that seems like
in the
quite
town
intense.
square.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So anyway, yeah, like you said, in an old West town, it would make more sense. Although part of the trivia I was reading up on, though I didn't stick in my own trivia, is Serling apparently wrote this in response to the Kennedy assassination, which was 4 or 5 months earlier, right?
yeah.
So I
Interesting.
guess in that case, it has to be modern. Like at the end when they're saying, "Oh, this place is dark. This place is dark." He's got the
Yeah.
North Vietnam reference, so that's very much of the time. They
Hmm.
do mention a street in Dallas, so. I guess
Yeah.
it has to be modern day for that to work, but yeah, that was weird. And like you mentioned, the weird threadbare sets. And I've recently been on Peter Pan's flight and I just couldn't help notice the clock tower in this is like 80 times crappier than the one in there. I mean, that one's not crappy. I'm just like, how can the Peter Pan's flight clock tower look fine and this one looks so garbage?
Yeah, it looks like a dollhouse
Yeah. And
clock. It's very strange.
they've shot on the Universal backlot. They've gotten the Back to the
Yeah,
Future clock tower in their episodes, including Where Is Everybody, you know? So it's just
but not this one.
no. I mean, this one just very much like you are now in a black box, right? I mean, this is black
Yeah,
box theater stuff, which is a strength of the Twilight Zone. So, it in no way, I think, undoes the episode, but you do sit there thinking about the production a little bit while you're watching this one because of that, I think.
yeah, yeah. And I think like it it kind of feels like it might have been written as a cost saving episode because the blackness is get makes gives production an excuse to not have any sets. Like you're just like literally standing in a patch of dirt with black behind you and maybe a car or two and that's it.
And this apparently was chosen over the producer, William Frog, wrote a script called Many, Many Monkeys, where the manifestation of hate that is blinding them instead of the darkness thing. So like they're going to do makeup where stuff was growing over their eyes so they couldn't see anymore. And I think the 80s zone actually uses a version of the script, but in the
Oh,
60s
interesting.
they're in the 60s they're like that's too disturbing. So uh I mean this one's just kind of like on other podcasts, I talk a lot about existential dread. I guess the blackness in here or the darkness in here just it has an existential dread vibe that the Twilight Zone doesn't always work with. Occasionally, something like
Hmm.
Shadow Play certainly does. But and maybe this is one of the most dready episodes we've gotten in season five, I guess.
Yeah, it's bleak, like unabashedly bleak in it, and it's about how, the hatred humanity has or that humanity can display for one another will lead to our doom. And so I find that more disturbing than gunk growing over people's
Yeah.
eyeballs.
Looking over a list, actually, I would say that the other dreadiest episode in season five, at least, is number 12 looks just like you, which is the
Yeah.
last time you were here. So
Yeah.
maybe I'm smelling a certain thread.
I've got a vibe. I've got a brand.
You're the dread guy. We got a horror guy. We
Yeah.
got a dread guy. Yeah, it works out nicely. Okay.
Hmm.
But yeah, I definitely was making notes partly through this that I would actually say the story it's a little bit janky in this episode. Like it doesn't quite make sense, which is fine, but it's won over by just the quality of the dialogue and the monologuing in this one is pretty top
Yeah.
flight, I think.
Yeah, the dialogue is absolutely out of this world. I think on this one, even just like the banter between the sheriff and his wife, like you know, it seems like there's maybe 24 people in this whole town because the sheriff's wife is cooking the condemned man's last meal, and she's like, "Well, how does he like his eggs? Edible. They're the last eggs he's ever going to eat, so make them edible." Just like
Yummy.
that exchange is delicious.
Yeah, the I guess he's a newspaper guy, but with a
Yeah.
fedora, right? I had this image of like if you did this now, like Dan Aykroyd playing that guy. I don't know, just that staccato sort of dialogue coming
Hmm.
out of him, you
Yeah.
know?
Um, yeah, I love the dynamic between these three characters, the sheriff, the deputy, and this newspaper editor, Colby. Um, like they're so or like they're all antagonistic in real interesting ways, and they all have such contempt for one another. And as pathetic as Pierce is as this like violent, cowardly deputy, you get the impression that the newspaper editor is equally as pathetic because he's you know the one guy who runs this paper in this itty bitty town, and the deputy says like your paper has more creditors than it has readers, like
24
like
readers.
Yeah, like nothing he writes like means anything, and he'll maybe court controversy to get to court readers. Um, and so even so, as much as you would want a journalist to be the moral voice in an episode like this, as that's dealing with prejudice and capital punishment, he's not that. And maybe he has like a fantasy of being that, but he's still completely inadequate for the situation.
Yeah, I might be putting on some like modern viewing glasses watching this, but I am like
Sure.
one more, meta level of this basically being a sixth sense sort of hell, right? They're dead and they
Hmm.
don't know it, that sort of thing. That would make sense in the setting of this episode, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it would probably be more logical than a small town executing somebody for murder of its own volition.
I mean, this almost feels as encapsulated as something like Five Characters in Search of an Exit or something, another
Yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
black box show. But that one was very much like this is a black box or cylindrical can, as we learned in that one. But whereas this one, it's artifice, you know. So that's where I'm
Yeah,
like, are they all? I mean, that'll definitely get into play when we talk about like, are they in the Twilight Zone or not? So
yeah.
something
Yeah,
that oh, go ahead.
no, it's interesting that like, if this episode was inspired by the events of the JFK assassination, it's just so interesting that Sterling wanted to translate, that the dread that came from that assassination to the story about like racial prejudice, and that's very confined in this one town. Um, and I guess that was like the reason that of the Twilight Zone existing, but to translate these like world changing events into such like a bottle of an episode, I think is really interesting.
Yeah, and there is another strain. Serling had earlier written a teleplay for Playhouse 90 called "A Town Is Turned to Dust." That was based on the
Hmm.
Emmett Till case.
Oh, okay,
At the time, he had gotten some flack, trying to get that out. It says executive interference and network censors. So I think he was also kind of recycling a lot of the ideas from that into here, which maybe
sure.
is being like, oh, it's my JFK thing, kind of puts a little smoke for the censors or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
Although,
yeah.
especially the one thing that got past the censors, like, wow, is it Jagger calling them all you muckers? I got the subtitles. I'm like, oh, you can say it on
Hmm.
TV? Okay, cool. I mean, I guess you can, but I was like, that's intense.
Yeah, that I've never heard that particular epithet before. I guess it's
Well, that
yeah.
very
If
much
you can
seems
get
like I want to get a F-bomb onto network television. So
yeah,
just like Battlestar with all the fracks, you know?
yeah,
It kind of made me think of that.
it's close enough.
But if you've watched Battlestar, you've heard frack enough that you're like, it
Yeah.
sounds normal now. But you muckers definitely sounds kind of weird,
Hmm.
mucky,
And for
really.
me, I always thought that, frack in at least in the 2000s, Battlestar was a little like cowardly on their part. Like just say the F word, man. You're on cable. Like what's stopping you?
I don't
But
think you're on
here
cable where you could curse though.
you can like
Okay.
yeah, any pay cable channel but they just voluntarily adhere to
Hmm.
um FCC regulations most of the time. That's why South Park in the early 2000s could just arbitrarily have shit in an episode. So Sci-Fi could have done the same. Anyway, but for Rod Serling to have muckers in this, I think is was pretty ballsy.
And it seems like an extra one in 1964, when the
Yeah, yeah,
censors were a lot more intense. Although
yeah.
here yeah, we got people in bed that have that seem kind of a post-intimate situation, which I also thought was a little bit intense for 1964 TV. You do usually it's like sitcom stuff with the two beds and everyone's in
Yeah,
very nice pajamas or nightgowns or whatever. So
yeah.
there was that level of grit to this one, which it might be. This is kind of a juncture point where TV starts loosening up a little bit, whereas at the
Hmm.
beginning of Twilight Zone it was still very buttoned down. So over the course of watching the show, maybe we're seeing some relaxation of network standards a bit.
Yeah, and maybe even seeing the influence of the Twilight Zone itself on the show. That because of all the battles that Rod Serling had to fight, network TV is getting a little more permissive in its censorship policies.
Right. I guess we should think a little bit about the meat of this episode, which is the Reverend and his speeches, basically. I mean, that's kind of
Yeah,
the core of this one, which again, it's the situation is so dreamlike and maybe hellscape-ish, where you have this small town, because it's so small, like minorities don't even like quite make sense. So they when they all get together, there actually is quite, there's a mix of people there, right?
yeah, yeah. The Jagger has killed um a racist who he had gotten into a fight with, and it seems like the deputy perjured himself in order to make it seem like it was premeditated on the part of Jagger when it was really like self-defense. Um, but the Reverend says, you fought and you killed for me and mine, even though we're of a different religion and a different skin color. And so it seems like the Reverend is referring to a black community that we're not seeing, right? Like,
In that group, there are a few other black people in the extras. Basically, they don't talk, but when we see the
yeah,
24 gathered people, there's it's clear that there are a few
a
groups in this
few.
town.
Yeah. But then also, who is the Reverend preaching to? Like, is there a black congregation somewhere? Or is, one of the only four black people in this town just happen to be the Reverend? Um, I think it's all sort of, allegorical.
Yeah, and so dreamlike because watching the episode, you're
Yeah.
just like, okay, he's a reverend, blah blah. Oh, he's got moral ground. You start thinking about it, like, yeah, it doesn't quite make sense. Not in a narrative way, just in like a how it's set up sort of way.
Yeah.
It's very it seems gritty and realistic when you're watching it, and then when you start thinking about it, like, man, that was stylized again with the clock
Yeah.
tower and not them just like them focusing on it. Like it's very clearly been painted on the black wall. That they don't
Yeah.
even really try and hide that illusion at all.
And I think it's designed for us to focus on, the isolation of this town, and the built up hate and anger in everyone. And even though like I have no sympathy for the person that Jagger killed, like probably a clan member who was harassing the black people of the town, but he is also clearly a man consumed by anger. And it kind of seems like he was looking for an excuse to kill this guy that he hated. Um, and uh, I'm not sorry when a KKK member gets killed while trying to kill somebody else. Um, but it seems like Jagger liked doing it. Um, and is that the way that we want society to operate? Uh, Not particularly.
No, there is a like, it's like making the choice not to kill today, right? But and
Yeah,
and I feel like that's always the choice to make, right? This guy didn't, and he had no remorse about it.
yeah,
That's the one thing where he does have that streak of true violence because he just killed a guy and he's fine with it. Which
yeah. And
again,
he
it's
he
it's
doesn't
it's one of the
want.
most reprehensible people. So you might feel like you just achieved something a bit.
Mhm. Yeah, he doesn't want forgiveness. He doesn't want salvation. He doesn't even want solace from the sheriff or the reverend. He's just um yeah. What does he say? That's um sorry.
I was just thinking another weird thing about the Reverend that I just noted is he's not in the first half of the episode, and then he just
Yeah,
kind of appears again. It's like a dream where it seems to make sense that someone is just suddenly in the room and now like a major part of your dream. So
yeah. That does add to the dreamlike nature of it. But and he also absolutely functions as the moral core of the episode because um when he's addressing the whole town as if he's like giving a sermon. Um, He hated and he killed and he died. Uh, you hated, you killed, and there is no one of you that isn't doomed. Do you know why it's dark? Do you know why it's night all around us? Do you know what the blackness is? It's the hate he felt, the hate you felt, the hate all of us feel, and there's just too much of it. And so we had to vomit it out, and now it's coming up all around us and choking us. So much miserable hate. And as someone living in America in March of 2025, I can't help but feel really impacted by those words. And especially the fact that after that speech, it starts to get even darker. Like the blackness encroaches on the town and begins to swallow them up.
I mean, I guess that's the thing. We were talking a little current events before hitting the record. And for me, I get up in the morning, I see whatever the whack headlines are, and then I go off
Yeah.
about on my day, and the vibe's generally good. Like when I talk to people in the States, it's like, no, no, it's then you see this stuff and you're like, that's insane. And then you leave, and that's also like just in the atmosphere of interacting with people. That's what I'm missing. I'm not in that town, I'm not in the States, so I miss that
Yeah.
part, right? I just I look in from the outside, and I guess the point in here is since the whole town is now experiencing, other places around the world are now experiencing it. It's just it's impossible to be an observer is kind of what it's getting at, very
Yeah.
metaphorically.
Yeah. And I mean, at the very end of the episode, Deputy Pierce, who's been pretty callow and
My early nose
ig
deputy psycho.
yeah, yeah. He's been ignorant and violent throughout the entire episode, and he starts sort of like naively saying that, oh, it's just a fog. It's gonna lift eventually. It'll go away by itself. And Colby says, only God knows. And I think the current Democratic leadership in America has that attitude that it'll go away by itself. We just gotta be good little boys and girls, and we'll be fine. But hate and ignorance and discrimination doesn't go away by itself. It's a really hard, like dirty task to get rid of it. You have to really get your hands in it and get dirty.
For a little bit of a writer's hat experiment, I guess. I was wondering because the first half of the episode we're basically, I mean, I guess we're with the sheriff pretty much the whole time as
Yeah.
a protagonist. And then the newspaper guy, like you said, he's a little bit derpy, but he's you can associate with him way more than Deputy Psycho, right?
Yeah.
Would it make sense to just get rid of the newspaper man and have the Reverend involved in the
Mhm.
first half? Or is the effectiveness of it that he just kind of comes out of nowhere and starts, laying down sermons?
Well,
I'm thinking it's more
hmm.
narratively clean to, like combine characters in that case, but I am
Yeah.
wondering if that is the special sauce that really makes the performance work, that he's not there the first half.
Yeah, he does really come in and add a jolt of adrenaline into the episode. I think because Twilight Zone episodes are, only half an hour, that it is kind of jarring to see somebody show up in the last 10 minutes or so. Uh, and so maybe that device would have worked in a 45-minute episode or in a movie, like the way Orson Welles really upends the third man, even though he's only in like the last 20 minutes, half an hour. Um, but yeah, I think having that trifecta of characters in the beginning and then having the sheriff, the deputy, and the editor, and then having that dynamic upended in the end, I think is a strength in itself.
Yeah, because I mean, when I was watching, I was like, "Wait, isn't this the other Twilight Zone with African American actors in it?" Right? And it's halfway through. I'm like, "I haven't seen anything. What's going on?"
Yeah.
So I was like, did I hear that wrong?" Which I didn't.
Mm,
We got an amazing performance. It's just, yeah, it's
yeah.
totally backloaded, which I was not expecting.
Hmm.
And yeah, like a 25-minute episode, it seems kind of makes sense to balance it out a little bit, but the jolt is kind of
Yeah.
interesting while watching the show as well. So,
And I'm assuming it's also Serling's way of addressing the American Civil Rights Movement,
yes.
but by having a black preacher be the voice of reason towards the end.
So this week, yeah, I'm not quite sure where my questions are going to end up, even as I'm asking them. The first being who in this episode goes in or through the Twilight Zone. And just because we were talking about it after What's in the Box with the TV repairman, which an episode which it seems everyone hates, which is kind of fun. But anyway, we did say, oh, he works for the Twilight Zone. We haven't seen
Mm.
people recently. So I guess my first question is, what do you think the Reverend is he the least Twilight Zoney guy or the most Twilight Zoney guy in this episode?
Um, I think he's the one who's able to stand on his own 2 feet. So he's the one most capable of enduring the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I guess he
Whereas he's,
recognizes it because the
yeah,
Deputy Psycho is even when it's obvious things are getting weird, he's just going on and on ranting about the sun, you know?
yeah,
He can't see it.
yeah. Whereas the Reverend sees the hate and the doom that is approaching them all.
Right. And those are kind of our extremes. I don't even think I would count Jagger as one of those extremes. I'd say it's the Deputy and the Reverend. So uh
Hmm.
everyone else kind of being somewhere between those two poles. And
Yeah,
is that the Twilight Zone? Maybe the deputy's so psychotic that he's not as influenced it just by his own blinding himself. But how about that
yeah.
other the sheriff, his wife, the
Yeah.
newspaperman?
It's it. I think the sheriff comes to realize he's in the Twilight Zone because he finally admits that he could have pressured. Um, like he knew that the deputy perjured himself, but he didn't do anything about it because he wanted to be a reelected sheriff. And so he finally comes to realize the impact of that transgression by being in the Twilight Zone, but only too late.
Yes. And they kind of make it clear that at the first half of this episode that's a local phenomenon, right? It's just this
Yeah,
town at the start. So this is
yeah,
like the ground zero of whatever's going on. So
yeah. Yeah, and then it
some
becomes a worldwide phenomenon. So yeah, what is it about this town that's so full of hate that it begins to spread from here to North Vietnam, Dallas, Texas, West Berlin?
yeah, something that kind of makes me I kept thinking while watching this of if you've seen Twin Peaks: Return, the infamous episode 8,
Yeah,
which starts with the crazy nuclear bomb stuff, but it has that small town thing where it's kind of hard to tell. There's a weird creeping evil in the town at this point. Of course, it's like a weird monster in that episode, whereas here it's just a feeling and it's an
yeah,
execution, which is also horrific in its own right, but not as horror movie looking.
yeah. It's interesting you bring up Twin Peaks because I've started a rewatch of that. But Bob is like a physical manifestation of everything evil, right? It maybe everything evil in the town, or possibly everything evil like in the world. And here, the physical manifestation of evil is that encroaching darkness, whether that's a consequence of being in the Twilight Zone or like some sort of divine punishment that because of the hate that the world is propagating. It's interesting to see how like the consequences of evil manifest in these different small town mysteries.
Yeah, and actually thinking about that, maybe we don't let the sheriff quite as off the hook. I mean, we weren't anyway, but I am thinking because you mentioned Bob, and once Bob does manifest in the real world, and it's 25 years down the line, he no longer relishes as it's evil, right? It's just like a
Mhm.
mundane evil. Is that where the sheriff is at this point? Is he, maybe 20 years he was deputy psycho for all we know. He's chilled
Yeah,
out somewhat, but we don't. Yeah, he doesn't seem to have convictions at least.
yeah, the banality of evil. Yeah, you can only be Bob for so long before you become Doge.
Yeah, really. But yeah, because when we first see Bob in the real world, he's maniacally screaming at a mirror. Cut
Yeah,
25 years later, it's like, okay, let's go do some evil stuff. I do evil. That's what I do. Off we
yeah.
go. You know. Well, do these people deserve? I guess the whole town is in the Twilight Zone, or do we want to keep it there? Uh,
Yeah.
and do they deserve this trip in a Twilight Zone and
Hell yeah,
deserve
they
to?
do.
And then yeah, they do. Then they infect the rest of the world. So it's kind of like this is the Twilight Zone where it's like, oh, we all deserve to be in the Twilight Zone, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, a real condemnation of the entire planet, which yeah, at this point I'd say we deserve it.
You know, it's a Serling as most misanthropic in a way. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the advantage of having a show like The Twilight Zone where you could be hopeful and optimistic, and then at the same time, like the very next week, you could be like real dismal and misanthropic.
and again, that's the whole plus of being like an anthology show, you know?
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
So yeah. Um, so okay, sure, they all deserve it, that, but then we get again with the Reverend, who's, I mean, a very intense guy, but like, why is he in this hell? Because
Hmm.
why are any of us in this hell? But
Yeah,
I don't live in a hell, I think.
yeah. Well, I think that's part of the doom of prejudice, right? Like innocent people get caught up in its wake. So e- even though it's these people that are calling for the execution of Jogger that are manifesting this darkness, people that had nothing to do with it are still going to be swallowed up by it. And I think you could say the same thing about what's going on in America right now, in the same way that was going on with like Jim Crow. The people that those laws were affecting, um, they had nothing to do with it, but they're the ones most affected.
I'm looking at the list here of what at the end the other places they say are affected, which is just kind of an interesting roll call, and you have to think about 1964 geopolitics. But we mentioned North Vietnam, a section of the Berlin Wall, which was pretty new at that point. Areas of Shanghai and Birmingham, Alabama. Okay, get
Yeah,
Birmingham, Shanghai. What's going on in Shanghai? And this is just before the whatever it was.
the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Because
and
that
but
was
I mean we're still
67, I think.
we're still more than a de we're still 15 years into Red China, and so Mao is maybe peak Mao at this point.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I guess I
so
was
I
thinking of the Cultural Revolution as being peak Mao, but that is pretty close. So yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
A political prison in Budapest. Okay, that's an interesting one. And then the a section of Dallas, of course, that's the
yeah,
crux of the episode. That was the inspiration, apparently. So
yeah. Well, so there was a pretty famous case in Hungary where a former um Nazi resistance fighter uh was a cardinal after the war, and then the communist government then tried him for treason and convicted him.
okay.
Uh,
Is
so
that
so
that's
so
this
e-
vintage?
yeah, so that would have happened maybe 10 years earlier, but I think um like first 20 years of the Cold War, that sort of like political persecution kangaroo court would have that association would have still been fresh in the minds of people with they would have associated that with like Budapest, Hungary.
Right. Um, let's move on, I guess, to the third question about putting this on the tripometer, with zero
Hmm.
not being trippy at all, five being extremely trippy. Where do you want to put this one?
Um, yeah, I'd say five. I think like the black box element of it, the wonky uh legal precedent for a small town executing somebody on a whim. Um, the the apocalyptic night that envelops the world. Yeah, I'd say it's pretty trippy.
Yeah, I guess for me, I need just some bizarre visual effect in my Twilight Zone to give it the
Okay.
five, which just does not have. The clock tower definitely does not count for that. But yeah,
No.
especially as we've been talking about it, I'm thinking it's a solid 4. I mean, if I'm starting to compare it to episode 8 of Twin Peaks, then something's going on here, you know?
Mm.
And the fact that once you start thinking about what you watch, you're like, wait a minute, that actually doesn't make like that's not how towns work, you know?
Yeah.
So it is just like the dream, where when you're having the dream, it all seems perfectly reasonable. And then later when you think about it, it's like, wait, no, no, all those things were not in place. I should have recognized it, you know?
Yeah.
Which I guess I guess that's kind of the cool thing about this episode. It gives you the subconscious feeling of what it's getting at too. It's not just,
Yeah.
it is bonk bonk on the head, but it's also subconsciously giving you a similar message.
Yeah, it's bonk bonk and under your pillow.
Yeah. So yeah, and this is, I mean, that's the point of doing a podcast, right? Like I watched this episode, I liked it, but as we're talking about, it, I'm like, oh yeah, this thing's like more layered than I had really thought having watched it on my own, you know?
Yeah,
Which
awesome.
the pluses of podcasting.
For
Is there
sure.
anything else that you'd like to throw out on this episode?
Um,
Observations or
I don't
valleys,
yeah, I think
rivers?
we got into everything that I wanted to talk about. Oh no, one more thing. Um, right before Jagger is executed, he accuses the Reverend of being with the majority now. And yeah, it's important to get with the majority, isn't it, Reverend? And his response, which I thought was really interesting, is that's all there is the majority. The minority must have died on the cross 2,000 years ago. And I've been thinking about that a lot. Um, and, I think, I'm Catholic, and one of my greatest um, frustrations, points of despair, whatever you want to call it, about the American political landscape is the way that religion has been used as a cudgel by the right to like force its agenda and its philosophy into America and forcing this might makes right Christian majority message and culture into America when everything that Jesus talked about and everything he sacrificed for was in support of and to save the oppressed, the poor, the sick, the outcast. And so for the Reverend to say that Jesus was a minority who died 2,000 years ago, um, I found that very powerful.
Although, yeah, throw that into the church and you have quite a debate going on, don't you?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
That's the minority died. Yeah. Okay. I grew up in an Episcopal church, so I'm just trying to
yeah.
figure out how you work that out theologically. But I didn't go
Yeah,
to seminary, so I'm
yeah. Neither did I.
yeah, give
I
it
mean, I mean, in
a I,
ancient Judea, like the Jews were certainly an oppressed people. They were under the boot of the Roman Empire for sure. Um, and honestly, I think, I think the current administration is trying to turn everybody who criticizes them into a minority, to be oppressed.
Right, right. I guess the idea though is just like as a society, if we turn one way or another, it's like everyone's along for the ride. That's part of the problem of what you're talking about in today's society, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
I can consider myself in a minority and consider myself to be a rabble rouser or a rebel or whatever, but majority is what's happening, you know?
yeah,
And that's the point of this episode. That the darkness is what's happening, and you can be as justified as you want, morally centered as you want. It's not going to help if things are in that direction, which
yeah,
that's a kind of a bummer now that I'm putting out that way. So, but that I guess
yeah,
that's where this is a certain kind of hell where that reverend is resigned to a certain point, you know,
yeah. And I
like
mean,
what
Martin Luther King talked about that, how like the greatest obstacle to black liberation is white liberals. Like they'll be okay with opposing like lynching, and voter suppression laws, but when it comes to absolutely like making it so that black people are not like that. to sorry, to try and make it so that the like black standard of living and endemic poverty is actually improved, they're going to do nothing. They're going to like support it in their hearts, but they're just going to go along with the majority opinion of whatever that is, and then because of that sort of like apathy, nothing will actually get done. And I don't know if that was in Rod Serling's mind, but the the dialectic between majority and minority kind of puts that in my brain.
It's like we'll take you to a certain point, and then from here, you should be fine. I was fine from here, so,
Yeah,
but you had a different experience, so you grew up in a
yeah,
different place, so that's not necessarily a stopping point.
yeah.
Um, I guess we'll start winding down today, but yeah, for that chatter, you have Popcorn Eschaton out there. What have you guys been up to there
Yeah,
recently?
wow. I'm really in my wheelhouse right now, I guess. Yeah, Popcorn Eschaton is a podcast I do with my friend Scott Duro. We talk about religion and politics in movies, whether that's like in the text of the movie or whether we kind of project that onto the film. So, episode 50, we did Hal Ashby's Being There and also Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And then the most recent episode we recorded was on Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal. So we go from Indiana Jones to Ingmar Bergman. It's a good time.
Being there in Indiana Jones were favorites, right?
Yeah, yeah. So for our 50th episode, Scott and I each picked our respective favorite movies, and his was Being There, and mine was Indiana Jones.
Okay, because I love
So
both
even
movies, but there's
yeah,
it's really hard to find a connective
yeah,
tissue
yeah.
between those two.
They are not connected. Usually when we do a double feature, they pair well in some way. Those were just because we like them a lot.
Right. Like, let's change the topic to the other one.
Yeah,
But of course, but both great movies.
for
Uh
sure.
Over here, this Time Enough podcast, do rate review positively where you feel like it. And then we're over at podcastios.org. We do lots of podcasting, really good movies and really bad movies as chosen by or rated by IMDb folks over at Films and Filth. John's there sometimes. We got
Hell
Podcast
yeah.
1999 where we have been talking about the Planet of the Apes TV series. It's one of those times when you're like, are we the first people
Wow.
to watch this in 40 years? But but hey, there's some good stuff in there. What do you know?
For sure.
And
Yeah,
there,
I love the apes. Yeah, yeah, there's plenty of good stuff.
well, even for me, I've had my ape rewatches for decades now. I never made it to the TV shows, so
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, neither have I. Yeah.
And that's all on Patreon as well at Podcastius. Okay. Well, the sun's out where I am, but I we'll see how long that lasts
You've avoided the doom.
for now. Yeah, I'll just cut it there then. Okay.
Oh, great.
All right. As always, thanks for bopping in. Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
that was
sorry
a good
for
one to pry into.
sorry for stumbling over my words there a few times.
That's fine. I mean, no, I mean, I'm like, I was like, do I need to edit anything? I'm like, probably not. It's fine. There's like a second of silence.
Sure. Just that I don't know. Anytime that happens, I'm like, haven't I been like doing this for fucking years now? And then sometimes I'll just like hit a brick wall with my mouth.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like you're subconsciously you just have that third track where just like crap starts coming out of your mouth, right? While you're thinking
Yeah,
about like something more potent to say, I guess. But
yeah,
that's vamping, I suppose.
yeah.
So I've gotten
Well,
better at
yeah.
vamping, that's for
Well,
sure.
well. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate you having me on to discuss this one. It was a good time.
Right on. Hold on before while I got you on, I'm just seeing where the Films and Filth list is with your name on it. I know that you're on, you got your name attached to
Yeah.
something down here. Next one. It looks like in about 2.5 months we will be giving you a call for Endgame.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the next one we have. And then actually you should have a look at the list because I don't think you've seen later parts of it. So oh no, you have. You're way down there for Harakiri. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay.
If
Oh, go ahead.
if the internet still works by that point.
If the internet still works by then, yes. Well,
Yeah.
I guess Twitter is officially over now, right? Yeah.
I wish.
The sacrifice. Oh, is it not? Okay, I just assumed that we were all allowed. Okay, I
No,
don't live in the States. I don't know what things
I'm
are like.
I'm not on Twitter. Like I still have my account, but I don't go there anymore.
Okay.
I'm on Blue Sky.
The only thing I go to Twitter for now is to look up one podcast's, post because they still post their pictures to Twitter, their Twitter account or whatever. But
Yeah.
but yeah, otherwise I like the podcast no longer posts there from
Mhm.
our host, which I'm like, that's fine. I guess they're on Blue Sky. The other guys have done Blue Sky. I put it on my phone, but I haven't like even started an account. So
Yeah.
but I didn't do Twitter until like I started podcasting. So I didn't even have like a Twitter account till like 2019. So
Yeah.
never been my
It was a fun
bag.
time in like 2015. It was great.
Yeah. Maybe Instagram is there right now, but we'll see how long that lasts. I mean, that's owned by Meta, right? So I'm sure
Yeah.
they'll screw it up at some point.
Great, 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 great.
Okay, I'm going to stop this recording. Goodbye to folks
Okay.
still listening.